I mean, I understand he's frustrated. It happens.
Steve Nash built his career on precision, intelligence, and complete command of the floor. He avoided drama, stayed calm under pressure, and rarely showed frustration. But even he had rivals who pushed him past his limit. Today, we break down the 5 players Nash quietly admitted he hated facing the most, starting with the rivalry that carried real bitterness on both sides.
I mean, he did body check.
Big Shot Bob is the one opponent Steve Nash never fully let go of. Every Suns fan remembers the moment in the 2007 Western semifinals when the entire direction of the series shifted in one instant. Phoenix was closing out Game 4, building momentum, and Nash was doing what he always did, controlling the pace with patience and angles. Then Horry stepped in with the most infamous body check of the era. Nash turned to slow the possession, and Horry lowered his shoulder and sent him crashing into the scorer's table. Nash's head snapped back. The arena froze. The referees rushed in. Everything the Suns were building was shattered in one collision. This was not a normal playoff foul. It was not a hard contest or a desperate reach. It was a full stop delivered with force and intention. Nash slid across the table. His neck whiplashed. His teammates burst off the bench instantly. Amari Stoudemire sprinted several steps onto the floor. Boris Diaw followed. San Antonio stayed calm, but the Suns reacted with instinct because they believed their star had been attacked. The NBA looked at the footage and delivered the most painful verdict the Suns could have imagined. Stoudemire and Diaw were suspended for leaving the bench. They had not thrown punches. They had not escalated anything. They took a few steps after seeing their point guard slammed into metal, and that was enough to decide the series. Nash has talked about this moment more than any other incident in his career. He never said Horry tried to injure him deliberately, but he always made it clear that the hit was unnecessary and had nothing to do with basketball. Nash is not a player who plays with grudges or anger, but he always paused whenever that clip from 2007 came up. Everyone understood what that pause meant. That hit cost Phoenix a title run. The Suns were built for that matchup. They were deep, dangerous, and playing their best basketball. Game 4 destroyed the rhythm, forced lineup changes, and removed their best interior finisher and their best utility forward. The series flipped. The Spurs advanced. The Suns never recovered their window. For Nash, the frustration grew from the timing as much as the physical impact. He had led Phoenix to a tie in the series. The Suns had just taken back control in San Antonio. The building was tense. Nash was orchestrating another late-game push. Then one collision rewritten the momentum of the entire postseason. Nash later said that the suspensions hurt him more than the hit itself. He accepted contact as part of the job. What stayed with him was watching teammates punished for reacting to an attack on their leader. The spirit of that Suns team came from trust and unity. They were emotional and connected. The rulebook did not care about that, and the league's decision left a mark on every player in that room. Horry tried to downplay the moment years later. He said it was a playoff foul that got judged too harshly because emotions ran high. Suns players disagreed strongly. They believed Horry made a calculated decision to disrupt a possession he could not stop. Nash never used dramatic language to describe the play, but his tone always carried the weight of a moment he thought changed the trajectory of an entire franchise. Whenever analysts talk about the Suns' championship window, the discussion always returns to the 2007 Game 4 hit. Nash's best teams fell short for several reasons, but that collision sits at the center of the heartbreak. Phoenix fans still view Horry as the villain of that era. Nash never publicly used that label, but the feeling inside the rivalry is well known. This is the closest moment Nash ever had to a permanent grudge. He forgave plenty of opponents over the years. He let go of dozens of playoff moments. He never fully let go of this one. The hit hurt physically. The suspensions hurt emotionally, and the result hurt historically. That is why Robert Horry tops this list. Moving to the next name, Derek Fisher became a personal landmark in Steve Nash's playoff career.
Even on the fly, he's like a...
Why, you may ask? Well, that's because Fisher delivered one of the hardest single collisions Nash ever absorbed. Their rivalry had history before the 2010 Western Conference Finals, but that series cemented Fisher as an opponent Nash could not stand facing. Every time Phoenix played the Lakers, the physical tone changed, and Fisher was almost always the one who pushed that tone to the edge. Game 3 of that series is the moment fans still revisit. Nash drove to the right side of the lane, reading the floor and waiting for a cutter. Fisher stepped across with his shoulder planted and met Nash at full speed. The contact hit Nash directly in the chest and knocked him flat, leaving him holding his face as the arena reacted in shock. The foul was immediate and obvious. The intent behind it became the real conversation. To the Suns, this was not a routine playoff stop. It was a message. It told them that Los Angeles wanted to unsettle Nash physically before anything else. What bothered Nash was not the pain or the fall. It was Fisher's demeanor after the play. He walked toward the Suns bench with a grin that made the moment feel more personal than tactical. Lakers fans called it playoff toughness. Suns fans called it deliberate. Nash rarely used that kind of language, but he did call the hit unnecessary. Even years after retiring, he mentioned Fisher's shoulder check as one of the most painful collisions of his career.
Once again, this time to the bridge of the...
The rivalry had already been simmering long before 2010. Lakers versus Suns matchups in the mid-2000s always carried friction because Phoenix wanted to speed the game up, while Los Angeles wanted to slow Nash down by any means available. Fisher was the player who executed that plan the most aggressively. He bumped Nash early in possessions. He fought through screens with force. He held the edge of Nash's hip on drives. None of those plays broke rules outright, but each one added pressure until something boiled over. That tension became clear during the 2006 playoffs, when Fisher and Nash traded long stretches of contact-heavy possessions. Nash tried to manipulate timing and spacing. Fisher responded by cutting angles and hitting him early in the dribble. Nash often left those games bruised, and both teams knew the physical toll was real. The Lakers understood that slowing Nash was the key to slowing Phoenix. Fisher took that job, and his style guaranteed conflict. Nash once said in an interview that Fisher played him like a linebacker rather than a guard. He said it with a polite smile, but the sentiment stayed true. Fisher leaned into strength and leverage. Nash relied on balance, rhythm, and finesse. When those two forces collided, Nash always absorbed the impact. It created a competitive hostility that stuck with him long after their series ended. Despite how heated the rivalry became, neither player carried hatred in a personal sense. It was rooted in playoff stakes and contrasting identities. Phoenix wanted freedom of movement. Los Angeles relied on controlled contact. Fisher became the face of that approach because he used physicality as his main chess piece. Nash respected Fisher's toughness, but despised the way it played out on the court. The 2010 hit remains the defining clip of their history. Every viewer understood that Nash got punished simply for being the engine of Phoenix's offense. That collision reminded fans how difficult it was for finesse players to survive in a postseason built on force. It also revealed how much Fisher embraced the role of disruptor. Shifting into the Spurs rivalry brings us to Bruce Bowen,
Over the foul limit. Oh, Nash behind the back. Stop.
the famed defender who gave Steve Nash more trouble than almost anyone he ever faced. The style clash alone created tension. Nash played with flow and precision, while Bowen built his reputation on interruption. Every time Phoenix saw San Antonio in the playoffs, Bowen became the person Nash had to solve before he could unlock the rest of the floor. That dynamic fed years of irritation on both sides. Bowen approached Nash with a blueprint that left no room for comfort. He pressed the dribble high. He crowded every catch. He tugged at Nash's arm on screens. He positioned himself so tightly that Nash's footwork had zero space to operate. Spurs fans praised Bowen for commitment and technique. The Suns saw something closer to calculated disruption. That difference in perspective fueled almost every postseason meeting between the two teams. The most controversial part of Bowen's approach involved his closeouts. Multiple players across the league accused Bowen of sliding his foot under shooters. Nash experienced that move several times and referred to it as dangerous. It was not a play the league talked about lightly. Landing on a defender's foot can end seasons, and Nash understood the risk clearly. When he spoke about it, his tone carried frustration rather than anger. He never launched into emotional tirades, but he did call out the tactic as one that threatened careers. Phoenix meetings with San Antonio often turned into psychological battles because Bowen had zero interest in giving Nash a rhythm. He bumped him off cuts. He nudged him after timeouts. He stepped into his dribble path and forced restarts. Nash valued flow above everything else, and Bowen's entire job was to break it. The Spurs relied on disciplined rotations and interior protection from Duncan, but none of that mattered unless Bowen made Nash hesitate. That single hesitation often shaped the next 10 seconds of offense. Bowen's reputation across the league added to the tension. He guarded the best scorers of the era and built his career on defensive precision. Nash respected the commitment, but disliked the line Bowen played on. Spurs players insisted Bowen stayed within the rules. Suns players disagreed. The truth landed somewhere in the gray area that only playoff intensity can create. The 2005 and 2007 series amplified everything. Phoenix believed they had the roster to outrun San Antonio, but Bowen slowed Nash's openings and forced the Suns into half-court possessions far more often than they preferred. Every extra second Nash spent trying to shake Bowen shifted the structure of the play. Tim Duncan knew exactly when to help. Manu Ginobili knew when to gamble. Tony Parker knew when the lane would open. Bowen served as the first domino that shaped the entire Spurs defense. Their rivalry extended beyond physical contact. Bowen liked to test opponents mentally. He talked during free throws. He whispered during dead balls. He stared at ball handlers without blinking. Nash rarely reacted verbally, but the irritation built over multiple seasons. Each series felt like revisiting the same maze with new traps waiting inside it. Nash had to stay calm and still find angles against a defender who refused to leave him alone for a single possession. Despite the frustration, Nash often acknowledged Bowen's impact. He understood that great defenders require great patience, and Bowen forced him to stay locked in every second he touched the ball. Nash did not enjoy facing Bowen, but he did respect the consistency of the challenge. Bowen never arrived in a game unprepared. He never softened his approach. He never gave Nash a possession to reset. Looking back, this rivalry symbolizes the broader conflict between Phoenix's free-flowing style and San Antonio's Antonio's structure. Nash represented creativity and pace. Bowen represented discipline and precision. Their clashes defined multiple playoff chapters, and even today, Nash still lists Bowen near the top of opponents who made his life significantly harder. It was not personal hatred. It was the strain of facing the same relentless obstacle year after year, created by a defender who committed every ounce of energy to shutting him down. Let's move on to a rivalry that feels strange in hindsight.
That triggers the rush the other way by...
Raja Bell was once one of the players Steve Nash genuinely disliked competing against. Before they ever became teammates, their battles were constant. Bell had a style that targeted point guards directly. He grabbed, he crowded, and he disrupted every cut. Nash, who depended heavily on space and control, had to deal with Bell's pressure from the first moment they faced each other in the early 2000s. At the time, the tension between them was obvious. When Nash was still in Dallas, Suns versus Mavericks games always created friction. Bell made sure of that. He approached Nash aggressively on every possession, reaching for the ball the moment Nash put it on the floor. He used forearms to redirect his path. He held onto screens a second longer than most defenders. Nash rarely reacted outwardly, but he struggled to mask how much those battles annoyed him. Bell played too physically for Nash's taste, and Bell had no interest in toning it down. Those matchups in Dallas were full of trash talk. Bell spoke constantly. Nash usually stayed quiet, but Bell found ways to get under his skin. Teammates from both sides recalled small moments where Bell and Nash exchanged tense stares or brief words before plays. Nothing escalated into a fight, but the irritation was noticeable. Bell never gave Nash a comfortable possession, and that is the kind of thing Nash remembered. The rivalry reached its peak during the 2004 season when Bell began emerging as one of the more aggressive perimeter defenders in the league. Nash, working in Dallas's high-paced system, needed to control the ball cleanly to find shooters and bigs. Bell disrupted that timing. He made every dribble a puzzle. He poked at the ball constantly, forcing Nash to shift directions or reset. Nash disliked defenders who tried to dictate pace, and Bell built his entire identity on doing exactly that. Everything changed when Phoenix signed Bell in 2005. Nash, already running the Suns' offense at an MVP level, had to welcome a former rival into the heart of the system. What surprised everyone was how fast the dynamic flipped. On the same team, their styles matched instead of clashed. Nash found out Bell could defend without crossing lines, and Bell learned how Nash ran an offense with clarity and communication. They built trust quickly. Bell became one of the pieces Phoenix used to stabilize their defense year after year. Despite that later respect, Nash never hid the fact that he disliked facing Bell before they joined forces. Nash admitted in interviews that Bell made games harder than they needed to be. Bell admitted the feeling was mutual. Both men clashed because their identities conflicted. Nash wanted freedom. Bell wanted chaos. Nash wanted flow. Bell wanted resistance. That tension produced some of the most physical guard-to-guard battles of the era. The Suns' era repaired the relationship completely. Nash valued Bell's willingness to take the toughest assignments every night. Bell appreciated Nash's leadership and honesty. What once felt like a rivalry became one of the more unlikely partnerships in Phoenix's run. Bell's presence gave the Suns an edge they lacked, and Nash respected him for sacrificing offense to anchor the team defensively. Their early friction still deserves a place in Nash's list because the feelings were real at the time. Before they shared a jersey, Bell was one of the most aggravating defenders Nash ever faced. At the point of attack, Bell caused the kind of discomfort that stays in a point guard's memory long after a game ends. Nash may have become friends with him later, but those Dallas-era battles left an imprint strong enough to earn Bell a place among the opponents Nash openly admitted he hated dealing with. Closing this list with the opponent who created a unique blend of respect and frustration for Steve.
With 1 scoring title, 1 trip to the NBA Finals, and 6 All-NBA.
Shaquille O'Neal represented the most overwhelming physical challenge Nash ever dealt with. The two played in different dimensions. Nash navigated games with balance and precision, while Shaq controlled space with size and power. Their rivalry never involved personal insults, but the physical toll Shaq placed on Nash made every matchup feel like a survival exercise. When Nash was still in Dallas, nearly 2,000 meetings with the Lakers always followed the same pattern. Nash would turn the corner on a screen, only to run into a wall built from Shaq's body. Even if Shaq was simply standing in the paint, the amount of force Nash absorbed when brushing past him made possessions feel heavier. The Lakers trusted Shaq to protect the interior, and Nash often had to adjust his rhythm just to avoid direct collisions. Those shifts in timing had real consequences in a fast-paced offense. One of the most memorable examples happened during a 2005 Suns and Heat game. Shaq kneed Nash in the thigh while sealing position, and Nash went down instantly. He later said Shaq hit harder than any player in the league. That moment was not an isolated incident. Shaq set screens that left guards staggering. He boxed out with weight that knocked opponents sideways. He leaned on players without trying to cause harm, yet the effect felt like bodywork from a heavyweight fighter. Nash understood this was part of the game, but it never made the experience enjoyable. Lakers and Mavericks series in the early part of Nash's career carried consistent tension because Shaq's forced Dallas to rethink every defensive rotation and every offensive possession. Nash had to dribble around Shaq's size, shoot before Shaq closed the angle, or avoid driving into him altogether. Shaq rarely targeted guards intentionally, but his presence made point guards think in ways they were not comfortable thinking. Nash thrived on instinct and quick decisions. Shaq slowed the floor without even touching the ball. During matchups with Phoenix, the frustration intensified. Nash had already developed into the centerpiece of the league's fastest offense, and Shaq continued to be the largest and strongest interior presence in basketball. Nash would slice into the paint only to get clipped by Shaq's hip or forearm. None of it looked violent. None of it even looked intentional. Yet Nash left those games feeling like he had gone through a full wrestling match. He said repeatedly that Shaq delivered contact unlike anyone else. Although their rivalry had a physical edge, it never grew ugly. Nash respected Shaq's talent and dominance. Shaq respected Nash's leadership and playmaking. The irritation came from impact, not personality. Nash understood why Shaq played the way he did. Shaq understood why Nash moved the way he did. They simply collided because their styles were built to challenge each other. Their careers eventually intersected in Phoenix when Shaq joined the Suns in 2008. The partnership surprised people because Nash had spent years taking the brunt of Shaq's strength in previous series. Yet the two found quick chemistry. Nash fed Shaq deep seals. Shaq complemented Nash's vision. The rivalry softened instantly. Nash even joked that it felt strange to run toward Shaq without bracing for impact. Still, the memories from earlier years never disappeared. Nash kept his distance in interviews when asked about the physical punishment he endured from Shaq. He talked respectfully, but the edge remained in his tone. Shaq represented a physical mountain Nash climbed repeatedly, and he carried the bruises to prove it. Nash rarely acknowledged grudges, which makes this list even more revealing. These matchups shaped his career and tested every part of his game. If you want the next deep dive into NBA rivalries and legends, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more breakdowns coming soon.